What is that?
What's the radio station? Humboldt Hot Air.
Oh, no.
But have you,
I thought you said, what's up? I was like, wait, what?
what's a radio station? Yeah, what's the numbers they're calling?
It's, oh, never mind. So
Oh.
it's Humboldt Hot Air dot.
I'll just put Humboldt Hot Air. Or does that have?
.org. Humboldt Hot Air .org.
I didn't advertise this at all, but I was like, obviously we should stream this on Humboldt Hot Air too. Of course, I thought of that like today. So I think she was gonna go do it. I don't see her, so hopefully that's happening.
He's giving us hand signals.
Oh, great.
Hello, everyone. Oh, that's okay. Thank you so much for coming out today and supporting us, the Women's Festival, Zero to Fierce, and also all of us women in radio. I'm really excited to have y'all here, and if you're tuned in from our live stream, hello, welcome. I'm going to start by just introducing some of the wonderful women that we have at the table here. Starting all the way at the end, we have Talvi Fried, who's representing from KZZH. Coming forward, we have Greta Stockwell from KHUM. After that, we have Sabina Gallier from KSLG. And then we have Alison Kolb from KMUD and Carlina Grillo from KRFH. And myself, Neroli Devaney, and I am from Humboldt Hot Air. And so I just introduced, thank you. I just introduced everyone, but I also would love for each person to go and introduce themselves and say what their title is at that station. And if you want to describe your job a little bit about what it means to hold that title, that would be great. And we can start at the end and come this way for that.
I'm Talvi Fried. KZZH is part of obviously it's radio, but it's part of programming for Access Humboldt, which also has a couple TV stations in the area. It's a nonprofit group that gives people access to not just media, but also how to make media. There's free courses, there's equipment, very inexpensive. I'm talking like $5 a day equipment rental. They'll help people set up in rural areas or even in the city if they're having issues getting connected. It's an amazing group to be part of. I am on the board of directors for Access Humboldt as well. And it's great to be here. I'm excited.
I'm Greta Stockwell, and I am the Assistant Program Director of KHUM, and I host a 6-hour daily, Monday through Friday, noon to 6, free-form radio show. So KHUM is a free-form radio station, which means that our programming is essentially up to whatever DJ is on the air. We do have sort of loose programming, so I help our program director, Midge, who is another woman, wish she could be here too. I do help her curate music. We do a lot of local music as well as all the content and a little bit of ad creation as well.
My name is Sabina. I am the program director, music director, and morning host of KSLG. KSLG is an alternative rock indie station. I also get to share building with the wonderful Greta and KHUM. And basically my job is to schedule, program the music, source the music as well, help my hosts curate their show by providing new music in the catalog. We mostly run on new, larger known bands as well as local bands. And yeah, basically running the ship of KSLG is what I've been doing since 2018, and it's been a super big privilege, and I'm very happy to be here.
My name is Alison Kolb. I'm the station manager of KMUD, Redwood Community Radio. At KMUD, our studios are out of Redway. Down there, we're 91.1, and up here in Arcata, you can catch us at 88.1. Yeah, I run the station, I build connections in the community, lead programming, as well as in control of the finances and development and outreach for the station.
I'm Carlina, and I'm the station manager for KRFH, which is Cal Poly Humboldt's student-run radio. And there's a lot of different managers who do lots of important things at KRFH, and I just am the person who oversees all the different managers, I help out everyone. I'm constantly getting calls. Whenever the DJs are having trouble, I'm always the person to call. So,
Yeah, cool. And I'm Neroli. I'm the station manager at Humboldt Hot Air. Humboldt Hot Air is an internet radio station. We are right next door. We used to be inside this building, and we just moved. So now we're right next door. We have all very diverse music and talk programming most days of the week except Tuesday. And we have over 60 DJs, which is really exciting, but I am the only admin person, so I also am receiving calls in the night and at all hours about things not working and knobs that need to be turned. So that's my role as the station manager of Humboldt Hot Air.
thank you.
So I'm going to get into our next question, which is what calls you personally into radio work? What do you feel makes radio work unique from other forms of media? And what brings you joy in radio work? And this one, I think, will just be popcorn. So whoever wants to start and answer that first can go ahead.
Sure. Someone has to. I knew I wanted to be in radio very, very young. I was one of those kids that would stay up really late trying to record my favorite songs, coming up with commercials, recording them on a tape deck. And then 8th grade, I did my career day on being a DJ. And I just knew it's what I wanted to do. And it is a very interesting medium. I also didn't like people looking at me that much. And I liked to hear my own voice, I guess, or thought other people might like to hear it. Maybe when I was a kid, a little bit egotistical, and somehow my little childish dreams came true. And it took a lot of work and lots of years and decades to slowly work into it, but it happened. And it is very different than any other medium that I've worked in. And that's a whole 10-hour talk, so I'm gonna, someone else popcorn.
I was quite obsessed with music and sharing music when I was younger. However, I didn't really think about myself in any sort of media. I actually started off as a kinesiology major. And fun fact, there are a lot of parts to the human body, and I'm not good at remembering any of them. So very quickly I realized that wasn't for me, and I was in SoCal wondering like what I should do with my life, and then I saw reporters covering the fires, and I was like, Mom, would you mind if I did that? And she was like, I'd prefer you didn't, but okay. So I thought like going into TV would be a good thing. So when I came up to Humboldt, I joined the journalism track, and I quickly realized I didn't like people looking at me, so this is great. And I was just like kind of figuring out. I started off in a lot of print as well in SoCal, like started off journalism in there and came up here, tried to do television, didn't really work, and then someone suggested KRFH to me. And within about 2 weeks, I had my own show, which was terrifying, but it quickly kind of pulled me out of this like weird place in my head where I thought my personality was too much. I always thought my personality was too big. And now I had a medium where I could kind of funnel my personality and let it be big. And if anybody wanted to listen to it, they could. And it turned out to be a fantastic career choice. And not only do I get to share, but I also get to interact with people on a completely different level than I would if I had been a kinesiology major. You know, you don't have to touch anybody, which is great. But but also just like being able to get calls every single day and relate to people, share stories. You now have listeners who like say, I have my radio on my desk, and it's like, I've got my friend on my desk. I'm like, oh, that's that's exactly what I want. And also doing what I used to do when I was a little kid, just share music, one of my favorite things in the entire world. And so radio has been not only like such a tremendous change in my life, but also it's kind of like healed this part of myself that I kept trying to push down a lot. And now I get to be a lot more expressive in my life and a lot happier.
Yeah. I mean, oh, go ahead.
What drew me to radio is really when I first left college, I started fundraising for nonprofits, and I got really into activism. I was working on social justice issues and environmental issues, and kind of building momentum there and raising funds. And I quickly realized that radio was amplifying our voices. They were really pushing the movement. They were interviewing us. They were giving us space. They were letting us be heard. And I just grew a really deep appreciation for that and for radio as a media outlet. And I came to want to be a part of that, be a part of the people who were drawing people in and giving voices to the movement. And so I first started working for KMUD in development in 2017, and then worked at KBOO up in Portland, Oregon for a few years before coming back down to take the station manager position. And it's definitely a huge honor to be a part of it and to see how like inclusive the station is and how much we try to let folks' voices be heard.
Yeah. I was going to say I really relate to Sabina because I came up to Humboldt as a forestry major. And as Sabina said, there's lots of bones in the human body. There's also a lot of trees in Humboldt, and I cannot remember the names of any of them. So I also loved music growing up, and I can't play an instrument very well. So I was like, how can I make music into a career? And in my head, you know, little ideas would come up like, oh, maybe audio engineering or being a manager of a band. But you know, nothing ever really clicked, and one day I was just walking around school. I was a freshman, and I walked into Gist Hall, which, for those of you who don't know, is a very creepy building on campus at Cal Poly Humboldt. And I saw the KRFH sign, and it said, join KRFH, be a live DJ. And it's like everything just clicked. I was like, a DJ? I never even thought of that. And as someone who joined radio just last year, beginning of 2022 is when I joined, it was something at Cal Poly Humboldt that was, you know, it was kind of like dying. I know that we'll touch on that later, but it was something where, you know, everyone was doing pre-recorded shows, nobody was live, nobody was in the booth, and starting then, it felt like, okay, this is something really small, but I saw the old journals, I saw the old Instagram posts, and I was like, wait, this is so fun. Like, why is nobody talking about this? Why aren't there 100 people in KRFH? And this semester, I'm pleased to say that we have nearly 50 DJs. So coming from when I started having, maybe 15 DJs, if that, it's been really cool to see how radio's grown. And as someone who came for the music, I really did stay for the news. I stayed for the live licks that we do. I stayed for the talk shows. And I changed my major to journalism because forestry was not for me, but radio is, so.
I was telling Carlina earlier that their social media presence at KRFH is amazing. They have like little TikToks and all sorts of fun stuff. I started my radio roots started at a very young age. I used to go on my dad's show when I was younger, which was at KHSU. So I was sort of introduced to that as a very young kid, and me and my sister would go on and tell stories, and definitely the wide audience that you don't have to look at. I remember being amazing at a really young age, being like, oh my gosh, there's all these people listening, and I know because they call in when we ask them to, but I don't have to see them and get scared by the audience in front of me. So, and then when I graduated from high school, I went to UC Santa Cruz, and there I did college radio at KZSC. And that's really when I fell in love with radio as an entity, as something that I could continue on to do for a long time. I worked, a show that I did for 4 years was called Queen Beats, and it was women in hip hop, which I loved. That's still my baby. And it still continues to this day, which I'm so proud of. So there's still Queen Beats DJs I've never even met programming that show, which is really exciting. And I also was introduced to using radio as an outlet to organize within the community, which was really exciting. So we did a lot of live events that were KZSC Presents types things. And I also dipped my toes in news when I was at KZSC a little bit, recording short news pieces. The news department was just being born at that point, so I was kind of a part of that. And then when I came back to Humboldt, I was just hanging out, thinking about ways to incorporate my college radio experience, but it's really hard. Life after college radio is a big topic when you're in college radio. And then Jackie over at the Playhouse had started this thing called Humboldt Hot Air, and she brought me on board, and then it became what it is today. But yeah, I think radio work is really unique and important, and I'm super happy to get to be involved in it, especially in Humboldt County. So,
Awesome. When I was little, I can remember I had this old radio that had the little flip numbers, and like feeling like the people that lived in the radio were always there for me. They were always playing these great songs and telling the adults what the traffic was doing. And I just thought those little people were amazing. And I wanted to be one of them because they had this amazing life. And I loved the electronics. I was just fascinated by the mechanics of the radio and how it worked. And once I realized they didn't live in the box, how cool it was that their voice traveled to my ears. And it's like such an intimate experience, I feel like, when you listen to the radio with a live DJ. And then I turned to performance. Like, my radio journey was really, I took a break from that, and I was an actor. I was a professional actor for a long time, and my first mentor was at KRCL, which is a community radio station in Salt Lake City, and I did a lot of radio drama, a lot of activism kind of stuff, but I was really more focused on performance art. And so I moved here to get my master's degree back when there was a master's program in theater, film, and dance. And so I have a master's in production and design, and so I toured as a lighting designer and did all this production work as well. And I don't like being the center of attention. I prefer to be part of a team. I love to share love and positivity. And so as my journey has progressed, I taught at, HSU then, and I was the master electrician. So I have like this interest in getting my hands into things and figuring things out, building things and electronics. And it just sort of happened that I got into radio again through performance, but also realizing that this is a really important medium and that it's accessible to so many folks and available, and that we have this voice that we can share everything, whether it's news or humor. And there's so much noise in the world right now, too, that I feel like, for me, it's about bringing intimacy in a really positive, comfortable way, and sharing music, too. I mean, you talked about managing bands. I've done that. I've thrown concerts. I've, worked with a lot of big names, and so I have that music desire. But really, it's about sharing, and for me, and not about being in the spotlight, really. Thank you.
thank you. So, My next question is, what do you feel makes radio in Humboldt County unique? Are there any special challenges or benefits of working in this area?
My favorite thing about being in Humboldt County and being in radio is that we're not subject to the control of like a large like corporate company. So KHUM and KSLG are under Lost Coast Communications, which is a locally owned media company here in Humboldt. And it's one of the challenges, I will say, is convincing music management that you're a real station in a real place. Because people have either not heard of Humboldt County or they've heard of Humboldt County. So like that can be a challenge, especially when sourcing music. But also I think the best thing is a music management company like a head will call you and be like, oh, we sent you the single, did you like it? No, we're gonna play track blah blah, and they get mad and you're like, sorry. We don't have to play certain things, we don't have to say certain things. We're not under the thumb of like, I don't even know their names anymore. What's like a big media corporation now? How long have I been in Humboldt? How long have I been here? But like watching, especially during the pandemic, I think a lot of us were very scared for our jobs because we're like, people are leaving the stations, people are having to go home. How do we do this? How do we work our stations from home? And one thing I saw from All Access, which is like a media community specifically for like broadcasting, is that these larger market stations, they were the ones going into automation, they were the ones that were firing people, they were the ones that were now just staffed by like 1 or 2 people. But small market radio was surviving because of communities funding them and because of communities wanting, small businesses and small communities wanting to continue their advertising and wanting to continue their support for small radio. And I think that is why we're so lucky to be in a place like Humboldt County, is because we have this just like web of community around us that wants us to succeed. They want to be able to hear their favorite DJ every day. They want their favorite DJ to have a job the next day. They want to hear that personality, that music. They want to be able to interact on a level that if you go to, say, like San Francisco or Los Angeles, is quite cold. You can't talk to a person most of the time. You can't talk to the person you want to talk to. But here, we like have such a connection with one another that it just makes the flow of life feel so much better when it's radio in Humboldt.
Yeah, I used to work at KBU in Portland, Oregon, and I'll say that they have such different needs than us here at KMUD and down in Humboldt. And Portland, like, is an awesome city, and KBU fills a really important need. They amplify the movements there, but Humboldt and the Emerald Triangle is so rugged and rural. It's really a beautiful place. And one thing that is so important with us here at KMUD is a lot of our listeners live out into the hills. Some of them live down dirt roads, and we're vulnerable at times to earthquakes, to wildfires, I'm learning new terms this year, like atmospheric river, and, the recent snowstorms. And so what has come up for us with more and more of these kind of wild events is that we need to be there to support our community and to make sure that they have up-to-date news and that we can break in and keep them informed and help to keep them safe. And that's kind of one of the challenges and the privileges of being a station in this rural community. We have an amazing news department. Our station manager, our news director, Lauren, is a rock star, and our staff are amazing, but we have a really strong group of volunteers that work really hard to get these emergency updates on air, whether it be folks tuned in to see if they need to evacuate for a wildfire, or whether they need to hear about road closures or learn how to prepare themselves before a natural disaster. we're always working to better ourselves and better our emergency response, so we can really fill the needs of the community. And so that's one of really the big differences that I've seen between here and in beautiful rural Humboldt, and the ways that, you know, we can be of service here.
Yeah, I think one other thing that is interesting about being a radio station in Humboldt is because of the unique culture that Humboldt has, like the kinetic sculpture race, for example. You're not gonna be in San Francisco and be hearing live updates about these giant machines crossing a bay that look like crazy rubber ducks or pirate ships. And, you know, if someone who didn't live in Humboldt was tuning in to KRFH, because this summer will be KRFH's second time covering the kinetic sculpture race, you know, if some tourist comes and tunes in to 105.1, they're like, what do you mean a pirate ship's crossing Humboldt Bay? Like, what's going on? So I think just, you know, the wackiness that already exists in Humboldt County helps the media and helps the radio embrace that wackiness. And, you know, if you're into that kind of thing, you can really be yourself being a part of the radio here.
Oh, and I want to kind of second what you were talking about with the news, getting the news out to people, is that I feel like recently with the way our television news has gone and the way the Times Standard has gone, I mean, we're lucky to have the Lost Coast Outpost and Red-Headed Black Belt. And I mean, there's other good sources as well, but I feel like we don't have the solid news coverage that we used to have. And so I feel like what we're able to do is try to get the truest information out there. Because if you're just living on Facebook, you know, you might get 70% truth, half the, you know, if that. You know, and I feel like what we do is really important in this rural community because we don't always have local news coverage. And, you know, even though we're mostly a radio station, we still try to at least communicate the important things, you know, that aren't necessarily going to be on Facebook.
On my end, I've worked in corporate radio out here, and one of the few corporate radio stations that has, they're based out of Oregon, and I was with them for 4 years, and I will say it is very typical of what you see out in Oregon, just down here in Humboldt County, where it's very commercial, and over the pandemic, it did become lonely in a way, and I felt like the only thing because I couldn't go anywhere or do anything, and everybody else was furloughed, so it was me and 2 other disc jocks in the mornings, and then we'd program the rest of the day. And one of the outlets I felt like I had, and I talked to a lot of other people too, because it was me in that room taking the phone calls. I didn't have a producer, I was the producer, and it was having this connectedness that you cannot have that anywhere else. You cannot be like part of this community while working in a commercial atmosphere like you can here. And when it comes to news, I'm gonna switch back to Access Humboldt, because if you watch the TV stations and listen to the programming on KZZH, it is a radio station built by people. It is all community submitted programming. It's all volunteer work that I'm doing with them at this time. Let's see if me getting paid for radio again will happen. We'll see that one in the future. Though it's that love of radio. You can't, well, there are other public radio stations out there and public TV stations out there. Though to have something like KZZH and Access Humboldt out here where it's user created, if you have a news story, you film yourself having the news story and post it. It goes on one of the several TV stations, it goes on the YouTube page, it goes out on the radio. So news is pretty instant, and that's incredible that you can, the difference between commercial versus something like that where there's a lot of similarities, at the same time there's a lot of big differences. One is so about how much money are you gonna make, how much money are you gonna make. while at the same time, if you're in that office, you're still feeling connected to the community. And if I were working for the same company, and I don't want to say the company's name since I don't think I gave them a good perspective or a good view here, though if I had worked for them outside of Humboldt County, maybe in Crescent City it would be similar, but anywhere else, any of the other locations, I don't think I would have felt not so alone during the pandemic. And I know a lot of other people who would call in wouldn't have felt not so alone, just to have that voice of, like, I'm listening to you, you're calling me and giving me information, I'm giving you information, we're passing it back and forth and telling each other it's gonna be okay. Because there was a really dark point during the pandemic where everybody was sinking into this depressive hole. And I think those of us who made it out on this side, we kept each other going in whatever ways we could, and part of that was radio.
Amen.
Yeah. Absolutely. I second all the points that were made here. And the addition I will contribute here is also, I think, working in radio in Humboldt County, I've noticed that it's just people have such a sense of community here, and they really, really show up to support. I've been so blown away by all the support that people have had for Humboldt Hot Air so far. We've existed for like a year and a half, and people have just been really, really here for it. And I think that that's something that wouldn't happen if we were in a big city, but people are really stoked to see things going on here, and they want to help make it thrive. So, yeah. So, getting into it, my next topic, according to the Radio Television Digital News Association, women accounted for 39.9% of the radio workforce in 2021, which is down from 44.4% in 2018. On top of this, white people accounted for 84.6% of all radio hosts in 2021. I thought we could discuss this and talk about if our stations reflect that, and if so, what are we doing to close the gap, and what challenges do we face in attempting to close this gap?
I've been program director since 2018, and since then I've been privy to all of the hiring processes for folks on KSLG. There are 3 positions on KSLG. There's the morning host, the afternoon host, that's daily, 5 days a week, and then we have a once a week Friday Night 90s host. And ever since I started as program director, during the hiring process for the afternoon position, there is nowhere near as many women applicants as there are men. I have interviewed 1 woman in my entire time. And it always boggles my mind, because every single year I look at it and I'm like, all of my afternoon hosts, all of them have been fantastic. They've all been white men. And I've interviewed 1 woman. I don't see enough women applying to radio. The reasons behind it, I mean, I don't know why, except for broadcasting to me has always seemed to be sort of like a boys' club. Ever since I was little, just broadcasting just wasn't something that I saw women in. You look at corporate media, I'm mentioning All Access again, every time they send out a newsletter and someone in management is involved, it's a man. They're having a panel discussion in a few weeks on the future of radio. It's 4 men and 1 woman. I rarely see women in management. I rarely see women DJs receiving their flowers or anything in those newsletters. I don't know if it's the boys' club feeling that media has always had. I definitely know that if I had thought a bit about the accessibility that people have to you, as a woman, I would have maybe double, triple thought about that before pursuing this career, because the accessibility that people have to you in this position is shocking.
It's crazy.
It's so shocking, but it's just one of those things where those are the only 2 things I can think of, and I wish I saw more women in my inbox curious about radio. I wish I saw more women in my inbox curious about radio in Humboldt. I wish a lot of those applicants were women, because it definitely radio is something that requires so much diversifying, and it requires so much to come from where it's from. When I started KRFH, we were given a few tidbits about like what radio would look like, what it looked like in the past, and what some practices are now. And like when I started, it was 2011. No female singers back to back. That was a rule of radio. If there were DJs, no female DJs back to back. One woman DJ per station. So, I mean, it's not surprising with like rules like that in broadcasting that we don't see a lot of women, but I want that shift to change because, you know, if you keep seeing the same type of person, same type of voice in media, less and less women are going to apply. You don't feel represented in media because media is where your voice is. Whether it's TV, whether it's print, whether it's radio, it's where your voice is. And if you do not hear your voice, if you don't see yourself represented, you are going to shy away from things like that. And I don't want women to shy away from radio because it is so important, more now than ever, that we be loud, we be heard, we make people understand who we are and where we're coming from. And if we start to see less of that, that is where we're going to see radio, I think, take a turn for, I don't want to say the worst, but it's the less women you hear on radio, I think the less you are going to see good radio happen.
Well, and since I did a little research, because that's the kind of person I am, and so Humboldt County is over 50% women, barely. It's like 49% men. So it's basically one-to-one demographics-wise. 72% white, 12% Hispanic, 7% Black, Native, okay? And our company, radio-wise, fits those numbers that you sent out. We are 6 women. We have 4 stations, the Lounge, the Point, KHUM, and KSLG. We have 6 women out of 16 total hosts. And we have 1 person of color. So we have 7% of our radio is a person of color. And when I first started, I was on the Point, and that was, that was 2017, so it wasn't even that long ago. And that was what I was told too, is that women DJs don't go back to back. So I think that is possibly changing because KHUM too used to be 3 men that did the daytime, and it's now 2 women. And so I think there's room for us to obviously to continue to grow. But I think demographics-wise, there's absolutely no reason why we should not have that representation. But again, if they're not applying, how do we, that's a really interesting issue.
It's not just a matter of not applying, it's being felt like you shouldn't apply because there isn't space for you. I worked in an environment where I was, let's never say the name of this corporate radio, I'm like, I was asked if I would like to make extra money by cleaning my boss's house. I was asked if I could, what is it, like a water scape, what's that thing? The power wash the sides of the buildings, all the cracks in the floor. I was told to do front desk clerical work, which I did. And I did all of this because I wanted that chance. And I felt like I had to do it, and I did have to do it. If I didn't do that, I wouldn't have worked at the company as a board operator, given chances to work with the engineer if anybody knows who the company is, please look up the news for the engineer I worked under because it's horrendous. What he was accused of a crime, and I wasn't supposed to be left alone with him because of the crimes he was accused of and is now in jail for. But he was the only one I could learn from because I was also interested in the technology and the equipment, and I wanted to learn. So I don't know if I was putting myself at risk, but I did it anyway. I wanted to do it because I wanted that job so badly. And I took over, it was my turn for the seat after producing for somebody else. A DJ that had been there for a very long time passed away. It was very, very sad. He was one of the few people there that really took me under his wing. And I was the producer for somebody they were trying to get to replace him. And then they said, it's your turn because this person doesn't want to come down. I took over for a guy. I was replaced by a guy. All of the other on-air live DJs at that company were men. I worked around men. I will say the station manager, she is no longer the station manager, but she is still a woman. Though the misogyny I faced, and if I brought it up, I was told, how dare you? We have given you a chance. And yeah, there are reasons that I left for the sake of my own sense of self, because I thought maybe I could do it on my own, because I needed to work on my self-esteem and realize what I was doing in life, because I did a fundraiser, which was a 3-day, 12-hour fundraiser. I won't say which one it is, but you can imagine it's a very, very sad, heart-wrenching fundraiser where you're told stories and you talk to people who come into the studios. During the pandemic, obviously, it was all remote, but the year before and year after, I did it too. And I was told at the end that I can't feel what it's like for all of these people because I don't know what love is, because I myself don't have children. And so me feeling sad, apparently I couldn't relate, and I could, and needless to say, I'm in therapy, so me and my therapist had a field day after that, and that was the beginning of the end when I heard those words. It's a matter of, there are positions open, but do you really want to go through it all? And now I'm with Access Humboldt. We strive for diversity. We strive our best. It is all volunteer submission, though, and to feel empowered to even create something. When you're told all your life that your words don't matter, that you need to sit there and be quiet and let the boys speak, let the boys handle this, let the boys do this, it's really hard to say, well, I want to do this, but I'm just going to be told no anyway. Like, you have to fight that, and it's really hard to fight that, and I think that's why there's not the applicants, because it's scary to put yourself out there. And I know firsthand exactly what it was like, just getting to the point where I could taste like, oh, I could do this for the rest of my life, then to realize nothing's gonna change when I'm sitting in that chair talking to people and listening to their stories and playing them music. And it took me a while. I had to get out of it, and then now obviously I'm back hosting Thursday Night Talks, which is more of a news talk show, and it allows me to allow others to have a voice. And I try to include women and people of color as much as possible on the panel, and I seek people out, my producer seeks people out, and I think I'm in a position with Access Humboldt where I can do that, where it's like, no, we're seeking you out, and we want diversity, we want different voices. Though a lot of people don't realize they even can have a voice, and a lot of people don't want to deal with what's going to happen when they do get one.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That was powerful. What is interesting about college radio, right, is, on a college campus in general, you're going to find more of that diversity than in the rest of Humboldt County. So in KRFH, over half of the DJs, just over half, are either women or gender nonconforming folks. And, I think that's really great. I also know that a lot of people in college radio are just doing it because they can, right? These are journalism majors who just want to try out being a DJ. These are music majors. These are forestry, kinesiology majors. So when I talk to people about what they want to do after college, very few people want to go into radio, which is interesting. I am someone in the journalism department who is, I like to say, I'm Team KRFH, because we have different publications. We have the Lumberjack, El Leñador, the Osprey magazine, and most people in journalism choose a publication and they stick with that. That's their main thing. And so I just wanted to add that, I'm a KRFH main, and I don't know how many others are like me, but it's very few. So although KRFH, I like to think we have pretty good numbers when it comes to this sort of thing, I don't know how much of that will translate post-college. And because of these struggles that women have faced, it makes me sad to think that people don't want to apply. You're not going to get those applicants. You're not going to see college radio DJs in your inbox, because when it comes to radio, there's a limited number of jobs out there, and I think journalism is so broad. I think it's easier for people to imagine themselves going into more of a writing position, writing for a publishment, because there's so many publishments and there's just not as many radio stations. But I like to think that, I like to hope that there will be people who are in KRFH and get that free-form radio and get to play what they want, talk about whatever they want. And we've had some really great talks, and we have a lot of members from El Leñador on the radio, and I think it's a really cool crossover that we can have. And I hope that KRFH is making it possible for people to want a career in radio outside of college. So that's what I have to add.
KMUD has been around for 35 years, and I'll say where we have excelled is we have been largely woman-led. Most of our station managers have been women. All of our news directors have been women. More than 50% of our staff, our board of directors, and our DJs have been women. We have so many powerful voices, so many powerful women's voices on the airways. We have Women on Wednesday. Every Wednesday, that's all female voices. We also have a really strong part of our leadership that's a part of the LGBTQ community. So that's something that I think that we've held a really big space for. I would love to see more people of color be on staff, be leadership in our board of directors. But what we're doing really to try and bridge this gap is to be inclusive and offer programming. It's really important for us to offer and hold space for programming for marginalized groups. And we try to reach out and build connections to local tribes. Some of them have their own talk shows, and we not only interview people and bring them onto our public affairs, but we let people set their own narrative by, giving them their own talk show. As a community radio station, we really want everyone in the community to feel heard and everyone in the community to have a space to speak to what's important to them and what they're going through. And so we definitely have room to grow and to do better and to build more connections to groups in the community. But know that you can reach out to us if you want to be a part. We'll train you. So, reach out to us and get involved. And we have a place for you.
Absolutely. And I guess just what I'll add to what you all have said is that I think so much of radio work is volunteer work, and I think that volunteer work is inherently such a privilege to be able to do, and that's such a big part of why so much radio work ends up being white men. It's because they are the ones that have the most time and can do things like that, and that comes with privilege. And so definitely something that I love about Humboldt Hot Air is that we're really accessible to people. We're part of that is just being an online radio station. We don't have to follow very many rules. So the training process is a lot less intense. So that opens the door for people who don't have time to, or are really intimidated by what it would mean to commit to being on a real radio station and what that all means. But Humboldt Hot Air gets to be a lot more casual for people, which I think in turn makes it a lot more accessible, which I love. I did, before we all met today, I was like, let me look at my statistics. And they weren't actually as bad as I thought they were going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot of men, which goes to show that men are take up the most space. But we do have wonderful women on our team. And out of our DJs, we have a handful of non-binary folks, so I didn't include them in these numbers. But we have 30 men and 23 women out of our volunteer DJs, which, I'll take it. Not bad. So it's we have about 10 minutes left until we'll move into our Q&A. So I thought I would ask one more question before we switch into that, which is that we've all heard somewhere in some way the idea that radio is dying, and obviously all of us working in radio know that that isn't true, but that the landscape is always changing and is currently changing. What do you predict for the future of radio, and do you have any hopes for that future?
As a college radio station, I think KRFH is, post-pandemic, from what I've seen, KRFH is really on the up right now. And I joined thinking, radio's dying, darn. But as it's grown just in the last semester, and with our social media team, shout out to DJ Lizard Queen, Kiana she's a social media pro, but because of this impact we have on social media, we've gotten people to join KRFH, based solely on seeing us on our media platforms. And, it is a niche, and just like vinyls, things are always coming back, and I think radio is coming back for sure. And one personal goal KRFH has is, because of our social media team, we want people to see us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it may be, and we want people to start applying to Cal Poly Humboldt because of KRFH. And our numbers have been this semester, after restarting our social media team, just restarting our social media presence kind of from the ground up, after really putting in a lot of work, our numbers have doubled. And on the first day of the semester, I said, okay, how many of you, just out of curiosity, joined because you saw us on social media? And almost all of the newbies raised their hands. So I think radio is definitely on the come up, and I think it starts with college radio. And like I was saying earlier, I never thought about the possibility of being a college radio DJ or DJ in general. And now that I have been involved with KRFH, it's seriously changed my life. And, now I'm thinking wow, the possibilities are endless. If there's this many people, this many women sitting at this table right now, it just makes me feel very hopeful, whether it's in Humboldt or somewhere else. There's a lot of opportunity, and I think there's, all of you showed up, so there's people who will show up, and there's people who are listening, and there's people who care. So I think it's on the come up.
Something that we've noticed at KMUD is that more and more of our listeners are tuning in online, and not just our Listen Live feature, but also our archive. I think there's a lot of people who are leaning towards wanting to listen to programs on demand, and less people who are okay, I'm going to tune in at 5 on Sunday. They might miss it, and they want to listen to it later. And so one thing we're doing is this year we're going to be launching KMUD podcasts, because we want to make that more accessible for folks who want to listen to programs when they want to listen to them. But I think what really makes radio special, we're all sitting here with you in this community, is that we're making programs from local people, about things that are most relevant to you and to this community. And so when we look at, other podcasts out there, there's always going to be a need for our programs, our local programs. And that's really what makes communities healthy, is we have the opportunity to have this civic dialogue. We have the opportunity to highlight the people doing good work here in Humboldt, the, nonprofits working on good projects, the local artists and local musicians. And so we want to continue to highlight those programs, and we think there's always going to be a reason to hold on to those. And so, we might have to make some adjustments, putting them on podcasts as well, but it will never be dead. We'll always be here for you, creating content special to this community.
I feel like radio is going to become retro and therefore really, really cool as people are going to be given their parents' old radios, grandparents' old radios. I think ham radio is going to be seeing a big resurgence, and I think it already is. There's HARC, which is Humboldt Amateur Radio Club, and the attendance for their classes has gone up post-pandemic and even during the pandemic for their online courses. I know online's going to take over for a lot of it because people do want that on demand, though the this is cool because it's old school is definitely going to be a thing. And radio is not going to go anywhere, especially in so many areas in Humboldt. People don't have any other option than getting radio.
Well, and radio is a science. I mean, it's radio waves. And so you either use them or we let corporate media take over.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to exist. And so if you want to see your local radio continue, you have to support it. And whether that's, volunteering or donating or whatever it is that you do, just listening and telling your friends, because those radio waves are there. So the only way it dies is if somebody else takes it over, or it becomes part of the 5G or whatever, that's where it will go. And so, but I know that we won't. I mean, we'll continue to try to make it happen. And I'm a ham.
Yeah. Go ham it, radio operators.
The person that gives me hope for the future of radio is one listener in Italy who will blow up my inbox if for some reason he can't hear the station. And I'm just like, that's very sweet of you. What are you doing? How did you find us? And people will find radio no matter what when they want to hear just somebody on the other end. And I know there's this huge fear that radio is going to lose out to podcasts. I feel like when you do podcast versus radio, even though podcast is on a very individual's control level, they can do anything with it. Radio has this beauty to it where we adapt to the world around us, we adapt to the community around us, we communicate with people in a way where the next day we could be like, all right, we have found a need in our community. We found a group in our community that needs us. We found an organization that needs us. We found people that needs us. How do we give them what we need? Let's do it. We are such a malleable medium that I feel like we are too important to dare I say the world? We're too important for the world to let us go. We have so much to give in the ways of personality, in the ways of information, in the ways of bringing people together. We are too important a communication system to just disappear or fade away in the next few years. I don't believe that it's ever going to be possible for that to happen. And if one day I'm wrong, you can tell the little man in Italy that I was wrong. But I feel like it's too important to people, and you hear that on the phone every day. I'm very confused because all the phone calls I get are from people who are listening in their car or calling me while they're driving, and me begging them to pull over and not call me while they're driving. And people are like, everything's moving online, which is absolutely true. A lot of stuff is moving online, but people still need us no matter where they're listening from.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of the future takes. I think that being Humboldt Hot Air, I love the idea that everyone's going to start listening to internet radio all the time, but I don't actually think that's true. And I think that at the end of the day, FM radio is going to be that core lifeblood of what radio will always be, and there will be fun things added and changing all the time, but that people will never stop needing it, and especially as the world becomes more and more chaotic, especially climate-wise. And I think that, unfortunately, things like the internet goes out when the climate is being crazy, as we've learned this winter. And that's exactly what you were saying earlier about KMUD being such a lifeline when we're in an emergency state. And I think that will continue to be more and more important as our climate goes crazy. Did everyone answer that question? Yes, okay. Well, perfect timing. It is 8:02, and we can turn it over now if anyone in the audience has a question for our Q&A, which we'll get going a little bit. I think Janie just went off to get the mic. And that includes some folks, if you're tuned in on our live stream and you want to type a question for our Q&A. I think Janie will be right back. It's right here. So if you have a question, raise your hand. It has to be in the mic so that they can hear it on the live stream. Thank you.
Hello. So my question is, can you explain to me, because I don't quite understand, why Humboldt Hot Air is internet radio and the rest of these, I think, are radio, and why you made that choice to do it that way, and kind of what the differences are, the pluses and minuses of radio waves versus internet.
Totally. Yeah, I think that the pluses of internet radio, the number one thing would be, well, reach, although I would also argue that probably most of the stations here also have a live stream on their website, so they have that same reach. But theoretically, when you're online, you have a global reach. And then I guess the advantage of being just internet radio and not FM is that we have a lot less restrictions. We don't have to worry about things like safe harbor hours, which is when you can't play cuss words until 10 p.m. But on the internet, we can play whatever music we want at any time of the day. There's a lot of other FCC regulations you have to follow when you're an FM station that really aren't that big of a deal, but like you have to say your station ID at the top of every hour. Little things like that we don't have to do. I would love to be an FM station one day. I think that's a great, really big picture goal. It's really expensive, and it takes a lot of people with knowledge to set something like that up. That me, as I mentioned before, being the only administrative person at Humboldt Hot Air, I don't have that. So it would require building up a team of people. It's totally possible, and it would be really exciting one day if we could do that.
If I can add to that, I will say I have 2 weekly shows, and most of my listeners are my family and my friends, all who live in Santa Cruz, and I'm sure I have some family watching the live stream right now. So there are definitely there's definitely the audience and the niche for online radio, and I think it is a really cool thing that this day and age offers.
And then also, like what you guys were mentioning about everyone's calling in when they're in their cars. Car radio listenership is so huge, and that is something that I think being just internet radio, we really miss out on, is the ability to stumble upon us. If you want to listen to Humboldt Hot Air, you're going out of your way to go on our website and stream us because you know about it already and you know you're interested in what's going to be aired. So that's something that I miss out on, is that extra listenership of people just kind of flipping through stations and being like, oh, that sounds good, I'll check it out, and then discovering Humboldt Hot Air. It would be great if we could do that. Yeah.
Well, and just for a point of clarification, with FM radio, you've got the tower that you have to pay for, you have an FCC license that you have to pay for, and so with that you have to abide by all these rules, and we don't have a lot of engineers in this county. One, maybe?
One, I think officially.
And
Barely, like he's on his way to retire. So like if there's anybody that is interested in becoming a radio engineer,
please apply.
you would have a lot of work. So it's not there. It's really, like she said, it's very expensive. It's very time consuming and very challenging, but it does allow you to just have a radio and you can get us for free versus having to pay for an internet service. But again, we all stream. And I've also noticed that our listenership is huge online. And I mean, it's the same thing. It's like the people in England or in Mississippi or, in Florida that are like, thank God for KHUM. Like, sorry that you live in Florida.
Hi, so
I didn't say that.
is that just me hearing the echo? Is there a weird echo? Anyway, so you touched on how often people are just really hoping there's that other person at the other end of the line, and I think about like different natural disasters or you know, just electricity's out or media's out, different types of things that I've experienced in my lifetime where radio was the only thing that was out there, you know, in the world as letting you know what the heck is going on. And so, you know, and I've experienced that in Humboldt and in other places, and I was just curious what each of your station's current plan or hopes for the future, if you don't have one, are for how you keep the show going when electricity is not there for you, or your adventures in it, whatever that is.
So we have, I wanna give props to the one person who keeps all 4 of our radio stations running. His name is Larry Trask. He's an amazing engineer, he's an amazing source, and he runs himself ragged keeping all of our stations on air. And so when they are on air, when we do have that capability and Fern Bridge isn't closed, we can make our way to the station because all of our stations, luckily right now, I don't know if it's currently on the uninterrupted power supply, but there is some magic box keeping all 4 of our stations on one side of the building on. Backup. And so that is, I mean, that's our current plan for when the power goes out. Each station has a folder of emergency numbers. We have a folder of contacts like PG&E, police, sheriff's office, everything. And we try our best to let people know that we're taking tips, we're taking information in the station, we're taking calls, that we have that ability to do so. And when we saw with the earthquake, when we had nothing, we had no internet, we had no power, nothing. That was one of the moments that I, like, for the first time, like, really feared for the lack of information that we were able to get out. We couldn't even get across the bridge to work. So our entire plan relies on our stations being on in a state of an emergency. And like I said, like, it was we need so many people, and we have one person helping us out with that, and we just do our best and basically hope that the lights are on in our station when we walk in. And we've seen, like, with power outages, where that's been extremely helpful to the community, where they've been surprised to hear us on air, and we just take each instance as they come. I mean, sometimes we have power, and sometimes we can't even get to the station. So the plan depends on how nicely nature decides to treat us that day.
Yeah, so, when I worked in commercial radio, I got really good at turning on a generator, because that's what we would do, is we'd hook it up and run wires in order to keep at least one of our 5 stations going at all times. And we'd switch off, because again, there were only 4 DJs that worked for the company that were live DJs, and we just switch off all day to make sure one radio station was always going on. So, and that updates were always being given out during, say, the PSPs, or not PlayStations, the power, the
Public safety power
shut-offs, yes,
Okay.
the PSs, when that was happening. And then there were certain other moments where towers would go out because of people who would accidentally kick them, which is, again, if you want to become an engineer, please do. Or if any engineer out there wants to train me, I would love the money, and then I get to hang out with electronics all day. I do want to say, all of the issues with power outages, earthquakes, it made me really knowledgeable, just trying to get everything working. And there's no solid way to make sure everything's going to work. We're a nonprofit, Access Humboldt's a nonprofit, so we go up and down depending on the situation a lot. I don't think it's as important as a super live radio program where people are depending on that. And then there's ham radio. And I recommend everyone get their ham license, which I'm just gonna give a shout out to Hark, because their classes are starting soon. They are absolutely free. I think it's 6 weeks, you get free for your amateur radio license. You go in, you take a test. All you have to do is get like 20 something out of 30 questions right. And there you go. You are a ham radio operator. You can pick up an inexpensive one for less than $30 and hit any of the repeaters. That really is the only radio that I completely trust during a major outage. is going to be the ham radio system and repeaters in the area, assuming that those repeaters work, because things can happen to the towers, flooding can take everything. Water is the biggest enemy of energy sometimes, or electricity. So I'm actually impressed with Lost Coast for always also keeping one station alive, because I'd be flipping through being like, who's on, other than me right now? And it'd be one of you guys when I was back there in that other job, so.
So emergency response is super important at KMUD, as I said before, and we have a really big reach where we rent space at the tower at Neelan, Pratt, Caddo Peak, and we have a repeater at Shelter Cove. When the electricity goes out, it automatically switches to the generator. But as we saw with the snowstorm recently, sometimes if there's issues, it's really hard to access the top of these mountains. Even for CAL FIRE and emergency response crews, it can be hard for us to get up there. One of the things we're working on doing as like a backup to our backup to our backup is we actually are going to have a little tower at our station's property that will only use, like say if something goes wrong at Pratt and we can't get out there, so that we're, it's not going to have as much reach, but it'll have enough to get us by until we can get it fixed.
Smart.
And we also want to have another backup tower at a friendly property out on Bell Springs as backup to our backup. We also have backup internet to our internet if one internet's out, and then we can choose another internet. And so we're, learning more as we experience more of these issues, how we can be just indestructible for these natural disasters. But yeah, getting, better and stronger and more resilient all the time.
In case of an emergency, probably don't tune into KRFH. Our electricity is if the school wants to turn on our electricity.
Yeah, don't try Humboldt Hot Air either. But if we have power and,
If you want to hear some hot takes by college students,
yeah.
this is the place.
I have a question about outreach and bringing more women into radio. I think that's really important. This has been an interesting discussion to take that into account, what's going on in the different forms of media that you present here. So we have 2 commercial stations, 4 nonprofit stations. And I'm hearing a difference between the commercial stations, as in women in management staff positions, as opposed to the nonprofit stations. And I'm wondering, so what plans can your stations, or do your stations take to recruit more women? This is a community where we have most of our nonprofits, in my experience, are run by women. KMUD, for example, is a great example of that. And also, if you want to touch base on it, Talvi, you might have a point on going from a commercial station to a not-for-profit station and what that looks like, the difference in there. And Alison, you having gone from KBU, meaning a very large nonprofit station, to a small nonprofit station. And underlying my question is just, again, outreach, getting out to the high schools, getting out to the colleges, because those are the training grounds for the commercial stations where somebody can go in and make it a career. Thank you.
Personally, I do a lot of, behind the scenes networking. Women that I know in the community, women that I know I worked with in KRFH, women that I know have experience in media in the community, who have worked with different journalism outlets in the community. I do a lot of behind the scenes reaching out and asking them, do you have any interest? Do you have any ideas? Do you have anything that you've always wanted to do on a radio station? Company-wise, I've not seen any initiatives in the direction of recruiting women. I would like to see them. Mostly that work is work that I do myself.
So on the commercial end, I don't really have any comment. I had nothing to do with the hiring process, except that I always tried to be like, if you want to be in my seat, you can be. Dream big, dream bigger. You know, if you have a dream, dream bigger. And now that I'm with Access Humboldt, we do amazing outreach. We have interns from CR. We have interns from Cal Poly. We are trying to be even more out there so people know that we exist. I mean, I'm sitting on a panel right now. Hey, Access Humboldt exists. We're a free resource for the community to create whatever content you want. You can even make something and not give it to us. It belongs to you. We're just here to teach you how to do it and give you the tools necessary to succeed in whatever goals and projects you want. I think that's something really unique that Humboldt does have, is we have Access Humboldt, which can teach people and give them the confidence to then go apply for the job. You know, back to that, you got to apply, but if you're not feeling secure enough in applying, regardless of all the other stuff that you might face, step one is you must go through it, and to even get there and to stand in a position where you go through it, you have to feel some sense of confidence or just really lucky. And I'm a firm believer in luck. So, you know, take a chance. You might get there. Though if you want a little bit more confidence, there's education programs in Humboldt County, and a whole group out right now. Access Humboldt is located at the College of the Redwoods. We've got a beautiful building. It's really cool. We used to be on the campus of Eureka High School, and there was a student program there for Eureka High School students. So we are always constantly outreach is kind of our main goal. Like we want to, or what one of them, we want people to create.
Yeah, I'll say that a lot of our staff did start as volunteers and programmers. And so, you know, creating an inclusive space was really kind of a gateway, is to like have programs that are inviting to, you know, women and also diverse communities. And that's kind of a, you know, it's community building, and it brings, you know, feet in the door. So it's always really important to make that a priority.
I know that KRFH would love to have any of you. We meet on Tuesday afternoons to come and pop your heads in and maybe do a little spiel, because, I mean, as someone who wants to go into radio, I think it'd be so like informational to hear from places where you get paid for doing radio, which is a crazy concept. But yeah, we would love to have you if you're interested.
Well, maybe we have time. It looks like we have one more question, and then we'll close it off because we're already over time.
Okay. I don't want to hog the mic, but okay. Two things. One was that I was part of a really cool youth radio program where they would actually give us tokens to get food from the kitchen or rent boogie boards for us to play at the beach because it was right on the water. And so I'm glad that you brought up, it's not near here.
Yeah.
Nowhere near here. But then you said you were at the high school, and yeah, you guys are awesome. But my question, which it might be too much of a question for a last question, but it was mentioned that being a female radio host, that you become very accessible, and something lit up in me when I heard that, and so I just was wondering, as someone who has a female presenting body, that's something I can relate to, and so anything on that?
I will. Definitely, if I had thought about how accessible this job makes you to people, I would have thought a lot about it. I used to be the afternoon host, and my program director at the time was also a woman. And when we would do live broadcasts, like we would do them, say, like at a grocery store or at the zoo, I have been yanked and pulled and groped in every direction. And once I became the program director and my afternoon host became a man, that didn't happen anymore. Once we complained to the company that we were getting harassed at events, once they had, say, a male sales team member come and hang out with us, the harassment stopped. There is so much sexism and aggression directed towards women, and Humboldt County is no exception. A lot of those events felt very unsafe being a woman. I have received phone calls I can't even talk about. I have received so much weird harassment. I've taken away a lot of features from the KSLG website. For example, no one's allowed to review songs anymore. I won't put anyone on the air because I've been told that I'm a little girl. I've been infantilized, I've been fetishized. It really is, and this is not to deter anyone from radio, because the reason, I'm just bullet pointing it, but the reason that I'm still here is because I love what I do. And the emotional toll of it is something that I have had to go through, and I've had immense support from the women that I work with. I've had immense support from Greta. Midge, I wish you could be here. Midge is the program director of KHUM. She's incredible, and we've brought each other through some hard times. This is a position that puts you in the public eye, and even though you can't see them, they can't see you. Phone call, in person, people want to be around you. They want to talk to you. They want to interact with you. And some people just go too far. And there is not a place in this world that I think is completely safe for a woman. And unfortunately, the thing that I love is no exception to that. But I love what I do so much that I have built a support system around me. I am a support for the women in my life in media. We have grown through it. We have fought through it. We've made our voices heard through it. We will not put up with it. You can't just yank us around. You can't just take up our time. You cannot just belittle our work. We put so much into what we do. There is no way that anyone is going to take this away from me, as difficult as it is day by day. I love the women I work with too much. I love what I do too much. I worked hard to get here, and just because someone thinks that they are entitled to take up my time, to take up my personal space, I will not allow it. I love this job. I love what I do. I intend to do it for a lot longer, and there's going to be people like that every single day of my life, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, well, and I think it comes from that intimacy thing. You know, it's like when you're on the radio, your voice is in someone's house, and maybe they're taking a shower, or you're with them every day they go to work. And it's amazing how often people think they know me, right? They think we are friends, like tight friends. We went through the pandemic together, we went through this stuff. And, they send gifts, they show up, they say I've gotten death threats. It's very strange. Well, right, and I'm a really private person. I don't like social media. I barely like to say my name on the air. And in fact, David Fernie the other day, he was like, you need to say who you are more often. I was like, okay, thank you. I probably do. But it's weird. It's definitely one of the hardest parts about it, because I love the sharing. I love that intimacy and that connection. But man, it's weird. And like you said, we just stick together. And that's really what I think allows us to get through it, is we can talk to each other about it. We can block people who are out of line. Yeah.
I know when I first started at KZSC, it might look like a lot of people have fun, wacky radio DJ names, but actually we were, at least myself, I was told to do that because we shouldn't be saying our real names on air, because stalking is such an issue. And as women, voices are inherently gendered. So people immediately hear your voice, even though that's not true, and it doesn't obviously include trans people or people who just have high or low voices. But people hear you, and they think that their imagination can go crazy. And I definitely, I experienced that a little bit when I worked at KZSC. Also just, I mean, this is just true of the internet, but just the way that the fact that you're not actually in front of them, I think makes people feel so much more willing to say crazy, crazy things to you. And when I was doing Queen Beats, a lot of people had an issue with women in hip hop, and they would just I would get regularly, most shows probably get messages just with like explicit, horrible things about the artists that we were playing. So, yeah.
Can I share? Do I have time to share a fun story? Yeah. Okay. So the one time the universe really gave me what I wanted was this guy and his friends used to call me and like sexually harass me, and we can't tell who's calling us, unfortunately. And they would say horrible things. Well, one time a woman called and we got to chatting. She was super nice. Come to find out, she's the mother of this guy. And so I tell her what her son has been doing. And she made him call me while she was on the phone with him and apologize to me. So I love her for that, and I think about her once a month because he never called me again after that. And he was like a real thorn in my side. So there is some good out there, but it is good that comes from a woman. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming tonight. Don't forget, the best way to support all of us is to tune into our various programs, support our stations. There's so much amazing radio happening in the community, which obviously, look at all of us. It was so exciting when I was first researching about doing this panel. I wasn't sure who I was going to invite and who would be, who was at what positions. And I was so thrilled to find out that there's so many amazing women in leadership in Humboldt County Radio. So definitely stream and donate if you can. And thanks for coming out. And check out the rest of the Zero to Fierce Festival. It's happening all week. There's a bunch of cool events, lunch boxes during the day, and evening events at night through until Sunday. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. She was, yes.
Oh, we should.
Thank you, Patrick.